You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again with the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go beyond our traditional hangout place in the world of options. Going to look a little bit farther afield, going beyond the Teslas and the VIXs and the SPYs and all that fun stuff, and see what's cooking in the land of crypto derivatives. We'll talk the volume, the volatility, the unusual activity, the skew, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from the aforementioned network, as well as, of course, from the ever-compelling theoptionsinsider.com. Of course, check out the website if you haven't been there in a little bit. All sorts of great content hitting you there throughout the week. Most actives, links, of course, all of our shows. And if you want to go above and beyond, you want to get the access to the exclusive pro podcast feed, as well as, of course, access to engage with us live throughout the week, myself and all of our other great hosts and guests on all of the shows that we do throughout the week, as well as, of course, get some great exclusive content, great pro Q&A coming up tomorrow, talking about trader psychology, options oddities every Friday, where you can see where myself and the Rock Lobster, where we're throwing good money after bad and all sorts of fun stuff over there. TheOptionsInsider.com is the place you have to go. Then you have to go to the Secret Club landing page, and that will get you more info on how to join us there for that fun Secret Club. And, of course, however you listen live after the fact, we don't judge. Make sure, however you listen, that, hey, if you like what you hear on the on-demand side, keep rating and reviewing. And, of course, keep those questions coming. We do love to hear from everybody. So let's see who we're hearing from on the show today. I am pleased to be joined once again by our old friend, Mr. Bill, a.k.a. Bill Ulivieri, a.k.a. the principal over there at Cenacle Capital Management, a.k.a. the guy who's bridging the gap between traditional investments and digital assets. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the show. How goes the gap bridging, sir?
Oh, Mark, it's been a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of really, really interesting crumbs of information and clues going on in the marketplace that I'm really happy and thrilled to talk about.
All right, then let's get to it. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. Of course, we're talking Bitcoin. But Mr. Bill, before we get there, as I mentioned, you're busy out there. You're not talking to me. You're busy out there bridging the gap, closing the chasm, the divide between traditional assets and digital assets. So obviously you have a foot in both worlds. So maybe let's start there before we even dive into all things crypto. Obviously, we're seeing, I think it's fair to say, some turbulence out there in the broad market, and even more since the last time you joined us. You joined us about 2 months ago in January. Since then, of course, we've seen a lot more exacerbation on the Ukrainian front. The invasion has actually kicked off. A lot of things going on overseas that are adding fuel to the market fire. What's been lighting up your tape over there in the world of traditional assets in these markets before we get into all things crypto, sir?
Oh boy, Mark, I tell you, I find it absolutely fascinating that we're actually talking today, because I think today and tomorrow are going to be incredibly key days in the overall broad market. And for me, I don't look at implied volatilities much as I used to, but I look at divergences. I look at, like the way a magician puts something in front of your eyes, but actually does the complete opposite, behind the palm of his hand. So I see the VIX indicator really not making new highs. I see the credit, I guess you could call it the VIX indicator for bonds. It's the symbol is ML Move. ML Move is a Bank of America bond index, the volatility index, and that thing is just getting crushed. And yet it has not made a higher highs than we saw last year, during the COVID decline. We have crude oil, metals, gold, silver getting smoked today. Crude oil down 5 to 7%, metals down huge. Bitcoin really kind of holding in there. And the big thing is this, Mark, what I see is if you look at the difference between value stocks and growth stocks, so technology versus dividend paying utilities and real estate investment trusts as an asset class, I'm not sure we've ever been wider in divergence between value hanging in there and growth on the low end of the range. So Bitcoin being growth and the dispersion between both asset classes may be the widest since 2004. I find it very, very interesting that the Ukrainian news, Russian news, gas prices, everybody complaining about things going on at the pump, happens at the exact same time that the rubber band has never been stretched further in the last 18 years. So I, being the contrarian long gamma trader that I am, have already begun moving out of value for my clients into growth. Now, we've just made baby steps. I don't have enough evidence right now, but the evidence is compelling that I think Bitcoin is going to hit its stock to flow ratio price this year as growth turns around, which is at $107,000 per token. I think that value is overdone like it was during the 07 to 09, Great Recession. I think growth companies and especially technology. Oh my gosh. Have you looked inside the components of the Catherine Wood ARK Innovation Fund? I mean, these things, year to date are down 73%. At least 73% is like the lowest year to date shellacking in technology. Roku, Invitae, DocuSign, Twilio, Spotify, Zoom. There's like really great companies they're all down 40, 50, 60% in the last, year to date. And it's March. So I'm being the contrarian that I am. I've got to feel like I've got to play this the other way, man. We've got to, we have to trade the bell curve the way it presents itself. And I see the same thing happening in cryptocurrency. Like a lot of really interesting projects, not fundamentally, but technically for a trade. We're seeing a move back to the middle of the bell curve. And I find that a really interesting thing from an asset management perspective.
It's funny you should mention crypto and value and tech and kind of the different weightings out there, because we had a guest on the show last week, Eric Kovalak. I think you're familiar with him. And he made an interesting point, because one of the talking points / debates / points of contention in crypto for the better part of the last 4 or 5 years has been, what role should crypto really play in your portfolio? And what is it? Is it digital gold? Is it inversely correlated? Is it non-correlated? Is it highly correlated? And he made an interesting point. People ask him that question. He tends to term it as effectively a high beta tech allocation. And so it's effectively, there's a lot of technology going on and all these new projects out there. And it's kind of hard to argue, at least for right now, that it's not a very high beta. And not only is it not uncorrelated, it is extremely highly correlated. You can just look at what the broad indices are doing any major day, and chances are the major crypto are going to be moving right along in lockstep with them. So, Bill, I'm curious for you, what do you think of that? Is that what crypto has become? Is it effectively now high beta tech?
Well, I think, I really like Eric. He's a great guy. And I agree with him about.
Oh, I hear a butt coming. Point, counterpoint.
No. What I'm saying is that I try not to look, because it's a new asset class. You certainly can't argue that of the 7,000 or 8,000 cryptocurrency tokens that are out there, that they're not somehow technology related and they're not a growth component. All right, I'll definitely give you that. But for me, I tend to take a few steps back and just say, is it risk on or is it risk off? It's as simple as that. Being long Bitcoin, being long crypto, that's risk on. Just like SPY, QQQ, IWM, and other commodities like that. So for me, I definitely see it as technology, high beta technology, absolutely. But at the same time, I'm just going to keep it more simple and say it's risk on, end of story. So maybe I'm just simplifying it so I can look at it again more broadly. Remember, I'm managing IRAs and 401ks accounts. They're not interested in super high aggressive beta technology. I mean, I do have 3 to 5% of Bitcoin in virtually all of my client accounts because I think it's the right thing to do, right? Just like I have QQQ and RPG, which is the pure growth fund, and RPV, which is value. But again, I just beginning to think that maybe value possibly may have run its course. And I just want to be open to that possibility that, I just don't want to get played here. And I just think we have to play the statistics and the bell curve and the dispersion like we did our whole life, Mark. I mean, that's really all this is taking trading floor theories and customs and habits and applying them to retail clients.
And are you still primarily using the grayscale?
Well, I have been following the BITO exchange traded fund. I've added those particular ETFs in my overall analysis. And it's interesting because when I wanted to talk about cryptocurrency performance and distributions, right, we're talking about the bell curve and, overbought, oversoldness. I do see BITO, BITO, kind of showing some interesting strength here, along with maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 other tokens. So we have tokens that have positive momentum on a 10-week moving average to the left side of the bell curve. So it looks like things are improving and strengthening. And these are the standout candidates. And BITO just happens to be one of them. It's, again, one of maybe 10 or 12 crypto projects, crypto asset classes, crypto securities, however, call it whatever you want. But just a crypto trade. And I find that that's, it's interesting. There's interesting little pieces of data and clues that tell me that growth is beginning to possibly look good compared to value. And I just want to be open to that. And crypto is part of that.
And let's get into the crypto landscape for this week. It's been an interesting week, maybe not quite as wild and crazy as you would have expected given what we saw last week in the market. But remind me before we get out of this segment, Mr. Bill, I have to pick your brain about that crazy whipsaw from last week as well. But we'll get to that in a second. First, let's look out there again at the big dog, which is Bitcoin. Coming into showtime, we were at about 38,500 and change. That puts us up about 1,100 points from where we were this time last show. Last show, we were 37,426. So a bit of a rally out there. We had an interesting range, not an explosive range, but certainly an interesting range over the course of the past week. The low was during our show last week, 37,300, and the high came a couple of days later on Wednesday, 42,400 and change. So quite the little range out there, a little over 6,000 handles over the course of the week. Again, it's impressive, but for Bitcoin, it isn't the most extreme range we've seen out there, and that's being reflected in the vol numbers. Bitcoin, I think for lack of a better term right now, is hanging out from a vol perspective. No matter how we break it down, by the way, all of these analytics coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. If you are even remotely intrigued by this space, and you're listening to this show, so I have to imagine that you are. If you're even remotely intrigued by Bitcoin and crypto and volatility and all these things we talk about here on the show, then go kick the tires over there at gvol.io. They're adding more analytics, more things all the time. If you're going to trade these things, it really is difficult, if not impossible, to do it without some information in your back pocket. And they provide all the analytics. gvol.io. And looking at these numbers, the current level of vol, they like to take a nice average at the money vol out there in Bitcoin options land. And when you run those, it's about a 76 right now. It's up a couple of points from last week, up about 3 points. There was a 73 on our last show, but again, not a huge movement from a Bitcoin vol perspective. In fact, our buddy, Mr. Simon Ho, over there at T3 Index, who has created his own, effectively, Bitcoin VIX, which he calls BitVol. It's at exactly the same level this week as it was last week. It was an 83 last week. It's an 83 this week. Again, reflecting not a huge evolution out there in vol from a Bitcoin perspective this week. And something similar in the skew. The skew is a little bit less pronounced this week than last week, but not a huge change. Last week, the skew was about negative 5.4. This week, negative 3.3. Still negative, but a little bit less so over the course of this past week. And again, that reflected in Simon's bit skew number as well, which was a 93 last week, a 94 this week. Not a huge change out there. Let's see if there's a lot of change out there from an overall open interest perspective. And we've seen calls ticking up a little bit. There's about 122,000 call options open on Deribit right now. It's up about 10,000 from this time last week. The puts, not a huge gain, 59,300 open on Deribit. It's up about 1,800. Again, it takes a pretty protracted sell-off. If we keep breaking down into the low 30,000s again and we keep selling off day after day after day, then we'll see those puts really start to kick in and tick up from an OI perspective. But right now, not a huge change out there. Mr. Bill, any thoughts out there? You said you're kind of watching this redistribution. What are your thoughts as we're seeing Bitcoin kind of hang out and languish in this mid to high 30,000s range for the better part of the week, sir?
I'm okay with languishing, to be honest with you, Mark. I think that if I saw new lows going in, or if Bitcoin greatly breached its lower band of its 10-week moving average, then I'd be really worried. But for me, once again, is it divergence? Is it the fact that maybe technology that I put Bitcoin in, is trading inside its normal distribution of 10-week moving average? Like the high is 54,726 to the upside. The downside is near its bullish trend line at 26,324. So again, if you take the low, the COVID low in March of 2020, just draw a typical old school trend line, lower left to upper right. Bitcoin hasn't breached that. We haven't exceeded our lows of 30,400 or so back from July of last year. And then before that, 30,470 in the spring of 2020. I'm just saying that I think it's interesting. And while growth and technology is getting absolutely slaughtered, Bitcoin's actually hanging in there pretty good. And I see that our higher lows right now is like a confirmation of divergence, and I like that, and I see that in many places, and I find it incredibly positive. And until for the time being, I like that Bitcoin hung in there. I'd be nervous if something else happened.
We don't want to make Mr. Bill nervous, so let's keep rolling on here with the
and
show.
Remind me, I got one more thing. Okay, so what I did is I went back historically, and I looked at the highs of Bitcoin and the lows of Bitcoin and compared them to the dispersions, the huge spreads between value and growth. In almost without exception, Bitcoin put in a high when growth put in a high, which happened to be in 2020 going to 2021, and going all the way back to about 2003. That's all the data I have for it. But it seems interesting to me, and I find it compelling, and I'm suggesting that Bitcoin is growth. Bitcoin puts in a high when growth as an asset class puts in a high, and Bitcoin puts in a low when growth makes a low in an asset class as compared to value. And so here we are, really interesting divergence. Bitcoin's high last year, when it was trading 66,000, was near the high in the growth component. And I'm just suggesting that something really interesting is going on that might not meet the eye for people only focusing on the Russian-Ukraine conflict or interest rates.
Speaking of highs and lows, I have to pick your brain on this before we go any further. You and I, of course, infamously had cigars during the flash crash, which was 12 years ago now coming up on Bill. Isn't that crazy? It's hard to believe. It seems like it wasn't that long ago. But yes, you and I, we spent some time. We've shared some big moments in the market together. I'm curious for you, what was going through your head last Tuesday where we saw this kind of now infamous whipsaw in the S&P where it was selling off hard on the news of Ukraine and what's going on over there in China and just general global panic. And then we saw the BTFD crowd come in. There were some rumors of maybe perhaps a détente in Ukraine. And so market turned around on a dime. We saw, I believe, about a 110-point rally from the bottom of the S&P all the way to the top. And then almost as immediately turning right back around again and selling off almost the whole way back down. I don't know if I've ever seen the S&P whipsaw like that intraday. What was going through your mind during that time, Mr. Bill? And you've been around for a bit. Can you equate that to anything else you've seen in the market?
Well, certainly not recently, but it certainly reminds me of how I wish I was back on the trading floor. Because, again, as a long gamma trader, you shine. I mean, you live for this stuff, right? The slow and steady grinds us down. It wears us out. It makes us complacent. And I had a lot of cash to allocate. And I'm not saying that I picked the bottom that day, but I came pretty darn well close for those client accounts who I've been holding back on, in allocating. And not every single trade was perfect by any means, but we were able to, buy value, sell growth. Buy growth and sell value at a really good time. We were able to allocate and use up the excess cash, for those clients that had just come on board with us. And we were kind of holding back a little bit, looking for lower lows. So listen, man, the slow and steady up, the thing that happens year after year after year, like that drives me out of my mind. But when we get volatility, like we saw last week and the previous weeks, man, this is what I signed up for. This is why I want to be an investment advisor, because my clients are sending me emails and text messages and phone calls saying, should we get out? Should we get out? Should we get out? Look at what's going on over in Europe. What's going on with my account? I'm like, no. We don't get out on a day like today. We get in on a day like today. We always buy an invasion. That's the rule. You buy the invasion. It happened during Kuwait. It happened during, the first and second Iraq war. I mean, it's just, so yeah, that's my story.
It's funny. I almost had the opposite reaction. I thought that could be a good day market making, but I also thought, some of those crazy days in the SPX, I had nightmares of putting up a trade and turning around to get your hedge off, and the futures are now the E-mini would be 20 handles away, right? And so
right.
That could easily happen on a day like that too.
Sure.
So it's funny. We had interesting.
The exchange could bust your trades.
Yes. The customer's like, I don't want that trade anymore, that I was panicking to buy that protection at the bottom. Now I think you should probably bust it or adjust it. I had visions of a lot of market makers wearing some tire tracks on a day like that. But hey, it could also make your year. So yeah, it's
exactly.
definitely the crazy times that the folks down there all sign up for. The few that are left anyway. Let's keep on rolling here, see what crazy times we have in store for us here from a crypto and Bitcoin options perspective. We were talking OI before. Let's see how the OI is shaping up right now. March and the quarterly still leading the dance out there on Deribit. 66,500 options open right now in March. It's up about 2,500 this time last week. Again, not a huge change. June, same deal, about 41,000 contracts open. That's number 2 right now, up about 1,700 from this time last week. And September bringing up the rear with a paltry 12,200. It's up about 1,000 from this time last week. So Bitcoin options looking a lot like ETH options right now, which is pretty much all quarterlies all the time. We'll see if that holds out. Maybe a weekly will swing in there and manage to kick September to the curb. We shall see. Looking at the size positions, where are you folks lining up right now from a Bitcoin options perspective? What are the big open positions in Bitcoin options? Let's start at number 5. It's actually a tie for number 5 between the 70,000 strike and the 45,000 strike. Both of them have pretty much exactly 9,200 contracts open right now. So they're fighting for the number 5 spot. Number 4 is the 30,000 strike that has 9,800 contracts open. It's up about 400, so up slightly. No huge real changes in OI this week. Number 3 is the 40,000 strike that has about 11,000 contracts open. That's pretty much exactly unchanged from this time last week. Number 2 is the 50K strike that has 15,000 contracts open. That's up about 2,000. And number 1 is the 60K strike that has about 16,000 contracts open. That's up about 2,000 as well. So interesting to see. Again, still more relevant strikes, maybe not the 60,000 strike right now, but the 30,000, the 40,000 is certainly a lot more relevant than what we used to see out there. The par, the 150, the 200,000 strike. Not seeing those dominating the top 5 anymore, even though 70,000 starting to get up there a little bit in the number 5 spot. In terms of action this past week on Deribit, the most active day was last Wednesday, the 9th. That's where we pretty much hit our high for the week. And that's also where we saw the most action. And again, I put action in air quotes because it hasn't been the most action-packed week. About 23,000 contracts going up. Then that compares to the week before. The most active day was about 25,000. The week before that was about 28,000. We've seen days of 37,000 and more contracts going up. So 23,000 is not exactly a ton, but it's not nothing either out there. And speaking of nothing, a heck of a lot of nothing going up over there on the CME crypto products this week. The Bitcoin options on CME traded a whopping 5 contracts on Friday, and the OI, not surprisingly, remaining unchanged at about 1,600 contracts. Futures, same deal. We've seen the futures easily do 30+ thousand contracts in a day, doing only 6,000 last Friday, so not a lot going on. Again, no surprise that the OI there kind of unchanged there as well, hanging out at about 10,000 contracts. Micro Bitcoin futures, that's where there have been some signs of life lately, a little bit more paper, a little bit more action going up out there. Everyone obviously excited about the new micro options that are coming. I'm curious to get your thoughts on those in a second as well, Mr. Bill. The micro Bitcoin futures, not exactly lighting the tape up last week either, about 16, almost 17,000 going up on Friday. That's a decent day, but nothing crazy. We've seen a lot more paper trading out there. And the OI, again, something similar, unchanged at about 13,000 contracts. Now, Mr. Bill, you mentioned earlier you like your Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. You've been slowly evaluating BitO. Doesn't sound like you're ready to dip your toes in there yet either. But CME broadening their offerings on the micro side, which might be a little bit more intriguing to your clients, including the upcoming launch of micro Bitcoin options. We've got the futures. We've had them for a while now. Finally getting the options on board over there at CME. Is that maybe causing you to cast another look over there at the CME products? Maybe something that's finally a little bit more right size for your clients?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Mark, and that is, I have my securities license. I'm not registered to do futures contracts. So for me, again, I focus solely on the ETF side. I do find it really interesting that the Merck has brought out these micro Bitcoin futures. It's pretty exciting as they try to attract, the smaller traders. I think it's really a good thing. And as Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy would say, there's no such thing as bad publicity for Bitcoin. It's all good. So this is a positive development from a trading exchange that saw the value of Bitcoin 6-7 years ago with their indexes and real-time pricing. I think this is just one more step forward. And you know what? Here's an interesting statistic I just saw this morning on my Twitter feed, and that is cryptocurrency exchanges the exchanges earned over $25 billion in 2021. So here we have this new asset class kicking the door down in terms of exchange revenue. And if you think that the Merck and these other are traditional finance, you don't think they're going to embrace this and leave a few $1 billion behind for these other people to pick up no, there's no way. So we're going to see more and more progress and more and more contracts, more and more conversation, more promotion, more marketing, better products on the traditional side because it's just too much money left on the side. There's no way they're going to let 23 billion go by without them getting a piece of it. And yeah, I think it's exciting, and we're going to see more to come. More to come. We're in the second inning here.
Well, speaking of more products and more to come, we have exactly that lined up for you next, listeners. It is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the altcoin universe, a portion of the show where we explore everything going on out there beyond really the big dog that is Bitcoin, except for right now. By the way, if you're intrigued by those micro options on not just Bitcoin, but ETH, we will have CME joining us on our TWIFO program, This Week in Futures Options, coming up in a couple of weeks on March 31st. That's right after these new options launch. So we're going to go deep into those. So if you're not listening to TWIFO yet, start tuning in because they're going to be talking about a little bit more crypto in the near future, I do believe. But let's talk about the top 10 out there in crypto right now. And let's go out here. Number 10 is good old Binance USD, breaking into the top 10 with about 17, almost 18 billion worth of market cap. Number 9 is Solana. How the mighty have fallen, down to about 79 and change. Come into Showtime, was threatening 150 not too long ago. 25.5 billion worth of market cap. Number 8, Cardano, similar one, actually trading at a similar level. And obviously 79 cents versus $79, but still also having come off its highs quite a bit out there in Cardano of late. 26.6 billion worth of market cap there. Number 7, we've got old school Luna at 33.8 billion. Number 6, speaking of old school, XRP. Will they, won't they? Will we finally have some resolution to this whole SEC brouhaha here? Still hanging out there at 75 cents and change, worth about 36.3 billion worth of market cap right now. Number 5, good old USD coin, 52.5 billion. Number 4, it's the old Binance coin at about 60.5 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, about 80 billion exactly, actually. Number 2 is ETH, hanging out at 304 billion. And number 1 is Bitcoin. A little bit more than this time last week, but not a ton nonetheless. 735 billion worth of market cap. Obviously, still well short of that 1T level, that 1 trillion level from a market cap perspective. Looking at ETH, it's had a little bit of a range over the course of the past week, but not a ton. On our last show, it was about 25.22. Coming into today's show is at about 24.76. So not even 50 handle increase, about 49 handles from this time last week. We had, like I said, a little bit of a range over the course of the week, got as high as about 27.63. Again, that was on Wednesday when it seemed like everything hit their high and hit its low during our show last Monday, 24.62. So pretty much in exactly 300-point range, 301 points over the course of the week. And all of that pretty much translates into vol and ETH pretty much hanging out at similar levels to what it was last week. In fact, vol-wise, it's exactly the same. About an 85 this week and an 85 last week in terms of skew. Almost exactly the same there as well from an ETH perspective. It was negative 6.5 on our last show, negative 6.8 this week. Mr. Bill, I know you like to watch a little bit of ETH out there. Anything catching your eye in the world's number 2 crypto asset this week, sir?
Well, again, I find it interesting because, again, just trying to compare asset classes between digital assets and traditional investing. Ethereum, I have down 29% year to date, which is outperforming almost every single stock, technology innovation fund in the Catherine Wood ARK Innovation ETF. So once again, you can almost combat the conversation that says cryptocurrencies are too volatile and they only go straight down, when in fact we've had Roku, DocuSign, and 24 more stocks down more than 30% year to date. So I find technically for me, Ethereum is pretty much right smack dab in the middle of the bell curve. High end of the range, I would put it at 4,200. On the low end, maybe 1,650. Kind of smack dab in the middle at the 2,840 area. Again, it's interesting. It seems kind of middling. Right where we were last year in May of 2021 is kind of where Ethereum is right now. So, right now it's a little bit oversold, but nothing fancy. I'm just keeping an eye on this and all the traditional asset classes, and I still find a compelling evidence that the lack of lower lows in crypto is a positive road sign, milepost for growth as an asset class, and I find that really interesting.
Middling is a good term for it this week, Mr. Bill. Everything's kind of just middling out there right now. Hopefully our show isn't middling for you listeners. Let's go check out some of the OI, see if we've seen any interesting developments out there from an ETH options perspective. And we've seen calls ticking up a little bit, about 1.38 million calls open on Deribit right now. It's up about 30,000 from this time last week. At the same time, the puts decreasing a bit. They're down to about 545,000 contracts open right now. It's down to about 43,000 contracts. So calls continuing to pile up, the puts continuing to go down. So those of you who are perhaps looking for that ratio of calls to puts to come in a little bit, not so much this week, listeners. In terms of paper, we saw about 204,000 contracts going up. Actually, today was the most active day on Deribit from an ETH perspective, not last Wednesday, which is kind of interesting. Again, that's kind of light. We've seen 400,000 plus contract days not too long ago out there. So today, kind of only half of that on the tape so far. So not a rock'em sock'em robots day. But again, the day is not done. We shall see how it wraps up. In terms of looking at the OI out there, where are you folks lining up from an expiration perspective right now. We said it before, we'll say it again. The ETH likes a quarterly. Is it as bad as Bitcoin? Let's find out. March right now, 715,000 contracts open out there. It's up about 23,000 from this time last week. So March clearly in the driver's seat right now. Number 2 right behind it is June. So still hanging out in the quarterlies with 463,000 contracts. Opens up about 9,000 from this time last week. And rounding out our top 3 is actually one of the weeklies. The March weekly expiring this week has 184,000. So managing to knock September to the curb, at least for this week. We'll see if more weeklies can keep popping in. Again, we're not getting a ton of movement out there. That's when you usually see people wanting to flock into those high gamma type contracts. But the day is young. The week is young. Who knows what we have in store for us? As Bill was saying, this is a pretty crazy week. Mark was just saying that earlier on our Option Block show as well. We have a lot of big numbers, a lot of big events coming up this week that already would make it a crazy week. Now you add on the fuel of the Chinese lockdown and everything going on with Ukraine, and it could act as an accelerant on that already interesting fire out there. So something to keep in mind. Let's look at the size positions. What is open right now in ETH options out there? And again, ETH, from a size position perspective, is starting to look a little bit like Bitcoin was, let's say, going into December expiration, with a little bit more, I think, shall we say, optimistic strikes dominating the top 5 out there. Number 5 is the 10K strike that has about 97,000 contracts open right now. It's up about 1,000 from this time last week. Number 4, getting even more optimistic, it's the 15K strike that has about 106,000 contracts open. Again, up about 1,000 contracts from this time last week. Number 3, getting really out there, the 20K strike. ETH at 20,000. What would it take to get there, listeners? How fast could we get there? What would that look like from an overall volume and indeed valuation perspective? Would we have the flippening by that point? I don't know. A lot of people are playing up there. 111,000 contracts open on the 20,000 strike right now. It's also up about 1,000 from this time last week. Number 2, we're finally getting to some more relevant strikes. The 4,000 strike, 118,000 contracts open there. It's up about 6,000 from this time last week. And the number 1 size position right now in ETH options, it is the 5,000 strike that has about 131,000 contracts open there. That's up about 7,000 from this time last week. So the top 2, arguably relevant strikes, everything else kind of in the optimistic range. You know, Bill, does that surprise you? Because we've seen a lot of those strikes kind of fall by the wayside in Bitcoin options. We're starting to see a lot more, I think, nearer to the money strikes dominating the tape. Whereas in ETH, it seems like optimism and hope still abound, sir.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what to make of all that, to be honest with you, Mark. I mean, in the old days, when I spent some time at the Board of Trade, I would look at the commitment of trader reports, and you try to figure out who's long, who's short. We look at open interest statistics from the Chicago Board Options Exchange. Where's retail? Where's institutional? You look at option skew like in the SPX, and you have a kind of a traditional looking put skew, but we have this hump, this really weird thing in like the SPX where once you hit the at the money, you'll see volatility tick up a little bit and then head back down again, like a speed bump. That bump is generally caused by people managing risk. It's you cannot just have short numbers everywhere, so you have to buy some stuff to get your risk numbers down. So I look at these open interests in the strikes, and I have to ask myself, how much is it just risk management? How much is it speculation? How much is institutional investors? How much is just covering DeFi lending by some, who knows, it's in a decentralized exchange or something like that? I don't know. I find it interesting, but I don't know how to work that data yet, and I think we're probably a little way along from doing that. And what it could be, how traders, how creative we are. We sell the overvalued volatility and we buy the undervalued volatility, and it doesn't matter whether it's corn versus wheat, beans versus soybeans, 10-year versus 5-year versus 30, Coke versus Pepsi. I mean, there could be an arbitrage in here that's being worked profitably, and we're just not privy to what's going on. It could be a 2-for-1 Ethereum versus Bitcoin arb. Like, what do we know? It could be anything.
Oh, that definitely is the case. I just like to look at the ratio of, shall we say, outlandish to relevant strikes, and it's definitely at a much higher ratio right now in ETH. We did see a lot of this in Bitcoin, and a lot of that went the way of the dodo with December expiration. Took a massive portion of the OI, somewhere around a third, close to a half of the OI, went the way of the dodo with December expiration. We saw something analogous from a percentage perspective in ETH, but obviously the, shall we say, optimistic strikes. And again, we don't know if people are buying or selling or any of those kind of things. It's just sheer volume on these strikes, listeners, which is kind of fascinating. And again, worthy of note, not a lot worthy of note out there on the CME front from an ETH perspective. The ETH futures doing about 2,600 contracts on Friday, and the OI pretty much hanging out at around 3,000, same level it was at last week. Again, micro ETH futures, these just launched back in December, and they had kind of a quiet week as well, about 14,000 going up on Friday. OI is down another couple of thousand to about 23,500. I think people are waiting, they're gearing up for the launch of the new, like we said, micro ETH options coming up towards the end of this month. So we'll be paying attention to that. But Mr. Bill, I love when you join us on the show because you always have an intriguing altcoin or two hanging out in your back pocket, sir. What is catching your eye in the altcoin universe these days?
Okay, the altcoin universe. So I'm not going to talk about a brand new project that I just happened to stumble upon because actually that type of conversation has been rather quiet lately. What I would like to do is, if you're a Coinbase, a user of Coinbase, and there's roughly 120 different tokens available to you, just if you're interested in trading, I find, again, virtually every single cryptocurrency token is to the left side of fair value, like that center line of a pendulum. And we have the ones that I find interesting right now are Matic, New Cipher, Omisigo, and our friend Shiba Inu, believe it or not, traded down to its bullish trend line. I find it really interesting. Dash, Synthetics, Avalanche, Polymath, and there's probably Beam, Ethereum Classic, surprisingly, and the Keep network are all to the left side of the bell curve, but their momentum has turned positive where all the other cryptocurrencies haven't turned positive yet. So for a trade, I think rather than just pulling one interesting project out, I think the trade here, if I'm right, would be to toe dip in some of these other tokens off of Coinbase, the ones that have a positive relative strength, a positive 10-week momentum, and are positive with respect relative to the other tokens that Coinbase offers. So those are my calls. I hope that helps. I mean, I know I took a little tangent here with that conversation.
Hey, the weirder, the wilder, the altcoin, the better, sir. So the more the merrier when it comes to all that fun stuff. Speaking of more, let's see if we can throw in a few more here before we have to get the heck out of Dodge. Let's head on out. We were talking about XRP earlier. What's up with our old friend Ripple? Getting a little bit of a lift this week, up to about 75.5 cents. It was about 72.5 cents on our last show, so up a little over 3 cents on the week. Dogecoin still hanging out at around 11 cents where it was this time last week's. Not a lot of change there. Litecoin, again, a little bit of a lift, a whole lot of nothing really on the week for a lot of these. Up about a little over about $2.50 from about 99.5 to almost 102 on the show this week. Let's get to some others. I know a lot of you like to pay attention to. Cardano at about 78.5 cents when we kicked off the show. That's down actually from about 81 cents on the show last week. Polkadot, we were bucking the trend, $16.50 on the show last week, $17.20 this week. So up a whopping about $0.75 over the course of the past week. Solana, again, still trending lower, 82.5 roughly on our last show. Coming into today's show is about 78.75, so down almost $4 over the course of the past week. And all those folks out there hanging out for the Shiba Lambos may have to hang out another week. Shiba pretty much hanging out unched this week. Not a heck of a lot of development there. All right, Mr. Bill, that music means we'll have to leave things there. But before we go, sir, if folks want to check out, I know when you're not talking to me, you're working on your own podcast out there. If folks want to check that out, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Well, Mark, I really appreciate the opportunity to shamelessly promote my podcast, which is a Spotify podcast called The Blockchain Advisor. You can text the word blockchain to 22828. That's the word blockchain to 22828, and you can get started with receiving our newsletter that we send out once a month, every 3 weeks or so. And then I'm uploading conversations and interviews to our Spotify podcast at The Blockchain Advisor.
There you go, The Blockchain Advisor. And if people want to hit you up at your day job, Mr. Bill, check out what you have cooking over there at Cenacle Capital. Where should they go? What should they do?
Give us a call at 847-686-4800 or visit our website, cenaclecapital.com. That's CENACLE, cenaclecapital.com, and use the form handler under the Contact Us, and send us an email, and we'll be happy to take a look and review a portfolio or have a conversation to see if adding Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to your overall investment strategy is a good thing. Do you have the tolerance and can handle the risk? It is a very interesting asset class to me, which is why I'm spending, and we're both spending a lot of time in this space. We see it for what I think it is.
Certainly an intriguing one at the very least. And if you want to be intrigued by Mr. Bill's commentary when he's not talking to us, of course, check out his podcast. Give him a follow over there on the old Twitters as well, at Cenacle Capital, CENACLE Capital, all one word. Some interesting insight he puts out there on Twitter. And of course, you know where to go to kick the tires and light the fires on all these numbers we were talking about throughout the show. GVol.io is the place to go. That stands for Genesis Volatility, the home of all the analytics we talked about today and a whole bunch more. We have to get on out of here, but we'll be back again tomorrow. A great pro Q&A coming our way. All you folks in the Secret Club get to talk about and have all your questions answered about all things trading psychology. You could argue it's more important right now than ever, as we're seeing a lot of psychological issues weighing on the markets, things bouncing and moving around off of key psychological support and resistant levels. So a lot to talk about there. We'll get into that tomorrow. Wednesday, of course, if you're new to this options thing, of any of these topics we're talking about here on the show today confuse you a little bit, then check out some of our educational programming, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Great place to start on our Education Wednesday shows. And of course, Thursday, This Week in Futures Options. If you're listening to this show, you should be listening to that. We get into crypto quite often over there, and we'll be doing so as well very soon when those new options launch at CME. Also have the option block on Thursday, Friday, volatility views. And for all you cool kids in the Secret Club, we're back with Options Oddities, and then back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.